Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Rahul and today we are going to dive into an important topic, that is render lifecycle method in React.js. So guys, in previous videos we have seen what are lifecycle methods, and we have also covered one lifecycle method which was constructor lifecycle method. So before we dive into nitty-gritty details of what is render lifecycle method, let us first understand what we are going to discuss in this video. So first of all, we are going to see how to use render method. Then we are going to see how re-render works and using states and props for re-render. Basically, on what conditions does re-render works. Actually, we are also going to see that by a code example. And finally, we are going to see an interview question based on this topic, that is render lifecycle method. So now, first of all, let us understand what is render lifecycle method. So in simple terms, the render lifecycle method is responsible for generating the virtual representation of your component's user interface. Think of it as creating a blueprint of how your component should look like and behave. Now, every time you update your component's state or receive new props or trigger certain events, the render lifecycle method comes into play to update the UI accordingly. This ensures that your app's interface remains in sync with the underlying data. Okay, so this means that whenever your state is updating or your props are updating, any of such things happens, that means that your UI should update according to that. And because of this only re-render works, or the render method or render function will update. So because of this reason, re-rendering occurs. Now before moving on, I just want you to know that if you want to access the code which I am doing in this video, you can come to my GitHub repository React tutorial, and you can find the topic name like render lifecycle method, and if you will click on this button, that is browse the repository at this point in history, and if you will go to any particular file, you will get the code of that file which I am doing in this video. So in this way you can also access the code. So now let's move ahead and let me show you first thing, like how updating the props results in the re-rendering of your component. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about why re-render occurs. Re-render happens when there are changes that requires your component's UI to be updated. Common triggers for re-renders include changes in component state, props, and even changes in the context if you are using it. When any of these changes occur, the render lifecycle method is invoked to generate the new UI. So in order to understand this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take two components. First is my app.js, second is my user.js component. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass some props from the app.js to user.js, and then on a button click, we are going to update the value of those props, and we will see whether our UI is updating and re-rendering occurs or not. So we will be understanding this example. So first of all, what I'm going to do is, and most important thing, these all lifecycle methods that we are studying now, like render lifecycle method, are being used in class-based component, because for functional-based component we already have React hooks, which we are going to see in the upcoming videos. So I am going to create a class-based component. So RCE, when I'll write the RCE, it will give me the basic snippet for the class-based component. Now here we are going to call the prop, and in the app.js I am going to create a simple functional component only, because here we are just passing the components, and for passing we can use functional components also, because here we are not doing anything related to the props, we are just passing the props. So I have created a functional component over here. So I'm going to save it for now. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to write the component's name so that we can see on the screen. So first of all, this is our app component, and this is our user component. Okay, so I'm going to write it like this, inside a div user component. Now when we will go to our screen and when we will see it, you can see app component being displayed on our screen. And now in order to see the user component also, we have to call the user component inside the app component. So I'm going to import it, and then I'm going to call it like this. Okay, now if you will see, you will get user component also. Now we will write our basic code, which is like, first of all, we will create a state, and based on that we will change the value. We will pass it to the pass it as a prop to the user component, and then we will change its value. So first of all, I am going to make use of use state. and now I'm going to create const name and set name. We have already seen this, how to create the states and all. So we are going to use state, and I'm going to set its initial value as the name humble. And what we are going to do is, in the user component, I'm going to pass it as a prop. So name equals to name. Okay, so we are passing this name humble from here to the user component, and what we are going to do now is we are going to create a button. So now a button is created. So what I'll do is I'll create a button before this component, and I'll write update name on click. I want that as soon as I click on this name on this button, my name value should be updated. Okay, so for that purpose, what I'm doing is I'm going to do the set name, and I'm going to write the new name. So the new name would be coder. So initially the name value will be humble, and then after clicking on the button, it will change to coder. Now we are passing the name as a prop to the user component. So we are going to save this file, and we are going to go to the user component. Here I'm going to extract that prop. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the prop as like this props, and we are going to display our props inside a console. So I'm going to write like this console.warn, and here I'm going to write the simple thing like hello and the name. Okay, so for displaying the props, we can write like this dot props dot name, our value, props name. So we have to write this statement outside the return function. So I'm going to write it over here inside the render function and outside the return function. So I'm going to save it. And now what happens, let's go to our browser window, and I'm going to open the console also side by side. So I'm going to clear the console initially, and whenever I refresh, you can see the value that we are getting is hello humble, which is our initial value of the prop which we have set. Now as soon as I click on it, you can see the value getting updated and the re-rendering happens. Now whenever I am clicking on this button, no re-rendering will happen, because we are seeing this example that whenever the value of props are changing, then only re-rendering occurs. Now since the value for props is same, which is coder, so now no re-rendering happens. So component re-rendering happens only when something is changed, like our state values are changed, or our props values are changed, or any event call has happened. So in that case, only this call like re-rendering happens. So I hope now you have got the understanding of this example, that changing in props results in re-rendering of our component. Now let us take another example where we will take the similar example for a state. So this example which we have taken now was for the props, because here what we were doing is we were passing the props from parent component to child component, and on the button click we were changing the value of props. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all these extra things. So I'm just going to keep the app component as simple as possible, and we are going to do all the things inside our user component itself. So I'm even going to remove this prop from here. I'm just going to call the user component here and nothing else than this. And in the user component, what we are going to do is we are going to create a state first of all. And now in order to create a state, we already have seen in the previous video, we need a constructor. So constructor method we are creating, and inside that we need a super method. And after this is done, what we are going to do is we are going to create our state. So how do we create a state in functional in class based component? This dot state equals, and here we can create our state. So here basically I'll create a state name as greet, and we will set the value as good morning as of now. And we will take a similar scenario where we will change the greet message to good evening on a button click. So here we are seeing the example that with the state update, the re-rendering occurs. Okay, so we are seeing this example because we have already seen the other example of props previously. So once this is done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a button here itself. Okay, and I'm going to write a update message. Message is basically our greeting message. So I'm going to write on click. And here I'm going to update my value of the state. So this dot set state, and with this we are going to set the state of our greet to good evening once the button is clicked. Okay, so we have saved the value. Now we are going to change this value to this dot state dot greet. So once this is done, we will save it, and now we will go to our browser window and we will open the console side by side. So I'll refresh it first of all. So you can see hello good morning, which is the initial value of our state, it is displaying. Now as soon as I click on update message, it should show hello good evening. So you can see with the change in state, the re-rendering is occurring and we have our new value, which is hello good evening. So now you have understood how re-rendering occurs and what is the importance of re-render method. So now it is the time for us to look at the interview question for today. So this interview question is very basic one. Like the question is, how do you force a component to re-render? We know that re-rendering only occurs when there is a change in state value or prop value or some event values. In that case only the re-rendering occurs. But if we want to force a component to re-render, what can we do? So the answer for this is, to force a component to re-render, you can call the force update method. This will trigger the render method of the component and update the DOM. However, it is recommended to avoid using force update as much as possible and instead use state and props to trigger re-renders. Okay, so it is always suggested that we have to use state and props to trigger the re-renders, and we should very rarely use force update. But yeah, it is equally important to know that in order to in order to force the re-render, we can use the method force update. So this was the interview question for today, and I hope you have got the understanding of this entire topic, that is render lifecycle method. And that brings us to the end of this tutorial on the render lifecycle method. So if you found this tutorial helpful, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your fellow developers, and subscribe to the Humble Coder for more insightful tutorials. Thank you so much for watching, and happy coding.